The ECG had been a straight, unforgiving line for minutes, silent, white, unblinking. Her skin cooled under the fluorescent wash, and the room adopted a strange stillness, as if the building itself held its breath. A nurse clicked off the defibrillator, eyes glassy. Someone whispered the time. Then, faint as a question mark in snow, a tremor touched the air. It wasn't sound at first, more like a feeling, a shiver running through the wrists of everyone present. The attending lifted his head, stethoscope paused mid-air. A family member outside the glass pressed trembling fingers to the window, searching faces for answers that didn't exist yet. The smell of antiseptic felt sharper, crueler. The monitor remained blank, but the room leaned in. A paramedic stared at the flatline, jaw locked, as if willpower alone could bend it. Another nurse folded the chart, grief heavy in every crease. The clock ticked with unkind precision. 7 minutes. 7 endless, echoing minutes. A sheet rustled. A breath? No, just the air vent whispering, and then the tiniest hitch disturbed the silence like a pebble striking a lake. The attending's hand hovered over the chest, not touching, almost reverent. He didn't call it, not yet. A prickling rose across his forearms, the kind reserved for moments when science feels outnumbered. The flat white line hesitated, quivered, a blink-you-miss-it ripple. "Did you see that?" the respiratory therapist said, voice cracking, because seeing meant believing, and believing meant explaining. A blip punctured the horizon like a flare in midnight fog. Another followed, timid, unsure of its welcome. The room surged forward in a single, disbelieving motion. Stethoscopes down, hands poised, eyes wide. A rhythm gathered itself from nowhere, fragile as spun glass, then steadier, louder, undeniable. They had called the end. But what happened next would challenge everything medicine thought it knew. Her name was Ava Morales, 33, a speech therapist who ran on coffee, kindness, and morning jogs by the river. The day her heart stopped, she had been laughing at a friend's text, mid-step on a stairwell, when the world narrowed to a tunnel and went black. In the ER, numbers failed her. Then, a headline no family wants: cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is not the same as a heart attack. It is the electrical storm that shuts the heart off like a switch. In Ava's case, that switch clicked down and refused to lift. Minute after minute, the ECG lay flat as winter sky. Teams rotated compressions. Meds followed protocol. The air hummed with urgency and the antiseptic bite of possibility slipping away. Ava's parents arrived clutching each other's hands like a lifeline that was fraying. Her brother paced, counting compressions under his breath because counting felt like control. The attending reviewed labs in clipped phrases, hunting a cause: electrolyte disturbance, arrhythmogenic channelopathy, silent myocarditis. Nothing aligned. The room dimmed around a single merciless line, the clinical equivalent of a closed door. Here's a medical curiosity that disturbs and dazzles in equal measure. Autoresuscitation, sometimes called the Lazarus phenomenon. Rarely, mysteriously, the heart restarts after resuscitation efforts stop, as if some final spark rekindles the circuitry. It shouldn't happen, and yet a handful of cases say otherwise. No ritual, no incantation, just biology behaving like a magician who won't reveal the trick. Ava's case would ride that razor's edge between data and disbelief. For 7 unmerciful minutes, the monitor drew a line across the horizon of hope. Then something flickered, like a city block waking after a blackout. Before we dive deeper into this shocking case, make sure to subscribe, hit like and comment what city and country you're watching from, so you never miss the next shocking story. Ava's collapse wasn't preceded by weeks of illness. She was in perfect health, or so everyone thought. Friends remembered her bounding upstairs 2 at a time, laughter echoing behind her. But that day, the simple act of climbing left her dizzy, breath snagging in her throat. She brushed it off as dehydration. Within seconds, dizziness spiraled into darkness, her body crumpling against cold tile. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Her skin was clammy, her pupils dilated. "She's unresponsive," one said, pressing fingers into her neck. No pulse. A heavy silence wrapped around them, broken only by the rhythmic thud of compressions. The ECG monitor painted a brutal truth: asystole, no electrical activity. For emergency teams, it's the word that closes doors faster than any other. Back in the ER, a resident recited numbers: oxygen saturation dropping, blood pressure unreadable, heart absent. The attending frowned, calling for epinephrine and amiodarone, voice clipped, professional, but with an edge of disbelief. Ava had no risk factors, no known heart disease. Her labs, rushed through point-of-care testing, returned unremarkable. The puzzle had no edges, just empty space. Her brother, Daniel, gripped the frame of the doorway, shaking his head. "She's healthy. She runs. She doesn't even drink soda." The nurse avoided his eyes, continuing compressions with mechanical precision. It was as if the room had split in two, one half filled with clinical voices, the other echoing the silent scream of family denial. And still, the flatline mocked them all. Autopsy terms floated into whispered conversations: channelopathies, rare electrical disorders where the heart's wiring misfires invisibly. Could this be Brugada syndrome? Long QT. The attending scribbled notes, his pen gouging paper harder than intended. None of it explained the sudden silence of a 33-year-old woman who jogged only hours earlier. Theories multiplied. Evidence refused to cooperate. Minutes stretched thin, 7 of them. The compressions slowed, then stopped, replaced by a hollow stillness. One nurse folded Ava's arm gently, as though laying down porcelain. Another covered her chest with a sterile drape. The attending checked his watch, opened his mouth to call the time. His lips shaped the first syllable, and then something shifted. At first it was subtle, a twitch, the faintest rise of the chest as though air had slipped back in uninvited. A resident leaned closer, eyes wide. "Did anyone else?" he began, voice failing him. The monitor crackled, light tracing across glass. A single blip carved into the flat white horizon, then another. The room froze, mid-breath. The ECG line was alive again, jagged peaks daring the laws of medicine. A murmur rippled through the team, disbelief and awe interlaced. Families outside clutched each other tighter, sensing change before understanding it. The attending didn't call the time. Instead, he whispered words, heavy with both terror and relief. "We've got activity." The doctors thought they had seen everything. They were wrong. The return of Ava's heartbeat lit the room with disbelief, but hope quickly tangled with fear. The ECG showed erratic bursts, irregular spikes refusing to settle into rhythm. Nurses scrambled to secure IV lines, shouting lab requests. The attending ordered intubation. "We need oxygen stabilized now." Her chest rose mechanically, yet her skin remained waxen, lips tinged with blue. Life had returned, but fragile, dangling by invisible threads. Family members were ushered into a side room, their eyes wet, faces pale. Daniel pressed his forehead against the glass before being pulled away. "She came back. You saw it," he pleaded, his voice cracking. A nurse promised updates, though her expression betrayed uncertainty. The miracle felt incomplete, like a fire rekindled from ash but refusing to blaze. Questions pressed heavier than answers. Doctors debated causes. "Reperfusion arrhythmia," muttered one. Another countered, "But she was asystolic. There was nothing to reperfuse." Someone suggested a post-resuscitation syndrome where circulation returns but organs falter under hidden injury. Ava's heart fought to steady itself, skipping beats like a hesitant drummer. Machines beeped, alarms sang their nervous chorus. Science had terms, but none offered comfort. Then came the first seizure. Her body arched violently, arms trembling as if pulled by unseen strings. Electrodes danced erratically. Nurses pinned IV lines, sedatives rushed in. The attending shouted, "Protect her airway, now!" The sterile air smelled faintly metallic, tension thick enough to suffocate. A woman in the hallway cried out at the muffled sound of monitors wailing. CT scans followed, rushing her through cold corridors. The images revealed no bleeding, no clot, no structural defect. The brain looked intact, but the shadows couldn't confirm oxygen loss. Hypoxic injury remains possible, the radiologist warned. Back in the ICU, Ava lay still, sedated, her lashes damp with residual tears. Machines breathed for her. Science stood watch, but fate smirked in silence. Her heartbeat continued to stutter, ventricular ectopics firing without pattern, as though the heart couldn't remember its choreography. Nurses exchanged glances, each spike a coin toss. Would it hold? Would it fail again? "We're not out of danger," the attending told Daniel. The words landed like stones in water, rippling outward. Recovery felt less like salvation and more like negotiation. By nightfall, a new complication emerged. Sudden drops in blood pressure, stubborn against fluids and drugs. Her veins collapsed, requiring central access. Catecholamine storm, one resident suggested, or maybe adrenal failure. Every explanation felt speculative, an umbrella too small for the storm. Machines kept her alive, but no one could explain why she had returned at all, or if she would stay. The ICU lights dimmed to twilight, shadows stretching long over Ava's bed. Her monitor beeped, irregular yet defiant, as though mocking the science that had tried to close her chapter. Doctors circled, exhausted, muttering hypotheses like prayers. Then, just as Daniel leaned close to whisper her name, the ECG spiked violently into chaos. The screen screamed, and with it, so did every soul in the room. The violent arrhythmia jolted the ICU into frantic motion. Electrodes peeled from sweat, alarms wailed, and Ava's chest convulsed under defibrillator shocks. "Clear!" the attending barked, each jolt illuminating pale skin against shadows. Her body lifted, then crashed back with mechanical inevitability. The line flickered, refused, then steadied only to collapse again. Every second stretched into eternity, her life dangling between electricity and silence. Daniel pressed his fist to the glass, whispering prayers that tangled into incoherence. Nurses slid syringes across sterile trays, hands trembling. For Ava, this wasn't just a battle for rhythm. It was a negotiation between biology and mystery. Why had her heart restarted after so long? And why did it now teeter at the edge of self-destruction? The contradiction clawed at logic. One resident recalled obscure case studies. Autoresuscitation paired with delayed arrhythmic storms. Rare, but documented. "We're missing a trigger," he insisted, flipping through lab results. Potassium, normal. Magnesium, borderline low. "Check her electrolytes again," the attending ordered, suspicion narrowing his voice. The team moved like clockwork, wound too tight, knowing a missing decimal could mean everything. The labs returned, normal, maddeningly normal. No smoking gun, yet the rhythm strips told another story. Episodes of torsades, ventricular fibrillation, then inexplicable returns to sinus rhythm. It was as if Ava's heart obeyed a rulebook written in invisible ink. The attending leaned against the counter, muttering, "Something's hiding, something we can't see yet." He wasn't wrong. The clue was already there. Daniel was finally allowed inside, suited in a gown and gloves. He grasped her hand, whispering through tears, "You came back once. Do it again." To everyone's shock, Ava's oxygen levels flickered upward as though responding. Monitors calmed slightly. A fragile truce. "Could be artifact," one nurse murmured. But Daniel felt it, a connection, invisible but undeniable, like she was listening. Meanwhile, deeper review of her history revealed a buried anomaly. 2 years earlier, Ava had fainted briefly during a marathon, but dismissed it as dehydration. An urgent care doctor had noted a borderline prolonged QT interval on an EKG, but never pursued it. The forgotten note now glared like a neon sign. Long QT syndrome. a condition where the heart's electrical system misfires fatally under stress. The discovery reframed everything. Stress, exertion, sudden collapse. It matched perfectly. Long QT can remain silent for years, only to strike like lightning. Worse, resuscitation itself can trigger more storms. "This isn't random," the attending declared. "It's her wiring, and we've been shocking her into chaos." Relief mingled with dread, knowing the enemy was progress, but the war was far from won. They prepared to counteract it. Magnesium infusions, pacing strategies, every tool medicine could offer. Ava lay still, her chest rising rhythmically with the ventilator, but the air vibrated with tension. The team now had a name for her darkness. Yet, as the infusion dripped and the room hushed, the monitor suddenly spiked into a pattern no one had ever seen before. And that was when everything truly changed. The new ECG pattern froze the room. It wasn't torsades, not fibrillation, not any textbook arrhythmia. Jagged peaks intersected with flat stretches like a language no one spoke. "This isn't possible," the resident murmured, pressing printouts into trembling hands. The attending stared, pulse quickening. "If we treat this wrong, we kill her," he said bluntly. The air vibrated with unspoken truth. Medicine had reached its edge. Magnesium dripped steadily, but the rhythm mocked their efforts. Defibrillation risked worsening her long QT. Drugs carried side effects as lethal as the arrhythmia itself. "We need a bridge, something to keep her alive until we reset her system," said the cardiology fellow, voice low but urgent. Ideas collided in whispers: mechanical pacing, ECMO, experimental cooling protocols. None promised certainty, all promised risk. Then came a bold suggestion. Temporary pacing, override her chaotic rhythm with our own. It wasn't standard, not with her unstable history, but desperate times bend guidelines. Daniel, summoned into the room, asked the question, trembling on everyone's lips. "Will it save her?" The attending didn't hesitate. "It's the only chance we have." Silence followed, heavy as stone. Consent hung in the balance. Daniel signed, ink trembling across paper. The team moved fast. A sterile field blossomed, wires snaked, monitors screamed with each delay. The attending's voice was steel. "Thread the lead carefully, we're playing with fire." The catheter slid toward her heart, a journey measured in millimeters and prayers. Each beep of the fluoroscope was a drumbeat counting down the unknown. When the pacing wires touched myocardium, the monitor erupted. For a breathless moment, the rhythm fluttered wildly, resisting intrusion. Then, a miracle of mechanics. The line steadied into forced regularity, artificial, yet reassuring. The team exhaled as one. "We've bought time," the attending whispered, but beneath relief lay unease. They hadn't solved the mystery. They had only wrestled it into temporary submission. Hours passed with Ava under forced rhythm, her skin regaining faint warmth, her lips tinged pink instead of blue. Nurses rotated shifts, eyes glued to monitors. Daniel stayed, hand never leaving hers. In whispers, he promised vacations they hadn't taken, birthdays she couldn't miss. To anyone listening, it sounded like bargaining with fate. To Ava, sedated, it might have been an anchor. Then came the shock. Even under pacing, her heart rebelled, throwing premature beats that overrode the device. The artificial order fractured. The attending clenched his jaw. "She's fighting the machine," he muttered, awe laced with dread. No one had seen it before, a patient's heart clawing its way past control, determined to write its own script. Science strained to keep up with will. The team had to choose: escalate to ECMO, an invasive bypass machine that carried equal risk of saving or destroying her, or trust the anomaly, allow her heart to dictate its impossible rhythm. Both options felt reckless. Both could decide her fate. The attending locked eyes with Daniel. "We either take over her life completely, or we let her fight." And in that instant, every soul in the room realized the next decision would change everything. The choice weighed like lead. ECMO meant survival through machines, but with risks of bleeding, infection, and irreversible complications. Allowing Ava's heart to lead meant surrendering control to a rhythm no textbook recognized. The attending's voice cut through the tension. "We follow her." Nurses exchanged wary glances, but Daniel nodded. For the first time, the team chose trust over technology. Minutes crawled. The pacing wires remained connected, but now they followed her erratic signals instead of imposing order. To everyone's shock, Ava's heart began to stabilize, as if relieved to reclaim ownership. Beats grew steadier, blood pressure climbed, oxygen saturation held. The ICU transformed from a battlefield into a waiting room, hushed and reverent. Even the machines seemed to exhale. Then her eyelids fluttered, sedatives tapered, but this was different, voluntary, fragile. A nurse whispered, "She's trying." Daniel leaned closer, voice trembling. "Ava, it's me." A faint squeeze answered through her limp hand, sending shivers across the room. Monitors confirmed what eyes already knew. Consciousness was returning. Against every prediction, she wasn't just alive, she was waking. Neurologists rushed to assess. Pupils reacted, reflexes fired. The CT, once uncertain, now matched clinical improvement. "Minimal hypoxic injury," one whispered, incredulous. Her brain had endured 7 minutes without circulation, yet responded like it had been spared. Cases like this existed only in obscure journals, anomalies that confounded researchers. Ava's survival was rewriting the boundary between medicine and miracle. Over the following days, progress snowballed. Breathing tubes were removed, replaced by careful sips of water. Speech returned in rasps, then clearer tones. "What happened?" she asked, confusion flickering in tired eyes. Doctors exchanged loaded looks. How do you explain the Lazarus phenomenon to someone living proof of it? They told her fragments, omitting how close she had lingered to death's edge. For Ava, the transformation was more than medical. Nights in the ICU became windows of reflection. She asked for paper, scribbling shaky notes about gratitude and second chances. Daniel sat beside her, reading each word like scripture. Nurses whispered that her recovery felt charged, like the room itself carried electricity. Every breath she took seemed borrowed from the impossible. Researchers requested her case for publication, citing its potential to expand understanding of long QT and autoresuscitation. But even the most technical draft left blanks medicine couldn't fill. How had her heart restarted after 7 silent minutes? How had her brain avoided devastation? Data offered lines and graphs. Ava's story demanded reverence beyond the charts. On the morning of her discharge, Ava stood by the hospital window, sunlight painting her face gold. Machines no longer tethered her, only a heart still learning its rhythm. She turned to Daniel and whispered, "I don't know why I'm here, but I am." Relief filled the room, yet a question lingered like shadow, because somewhere in the silence between science and fate, her heart had made its own decision, and the world would never explain it fully. Ava's survival became more than a medical record. It became a living contradiction. Her case reminded doctors that even with algorithms, guidelines, and advanced machines, the human body sometimes writes its own rules. For Daniel, it was proof that love and persistence could hold the line between life and death. For Ava, each morning felt like an undeserved gift, a chance to breathe the air she almost lost forever. Science labeled her experience as autoresuscitation, linked to long QT syndrome. Yet no explanation satisfied the eerie precision of 7 minutes of silence followed by sudden life. Was it the delayed effect of drugs, a hidden electrical restart, or something deeper, unmeasurable, lingering in the space where medicine cannot look? For those who witnessed it, the miracle was not in textbooks. It was in the beating heart they had nearly buried. Her story leaves us with a haunting question. What do you think really saved Ava's life? Science, fate, or something beyond both? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might shape our next conversation. And speaking of next time, don't miss our upcoming case, where laughter itself turns deadly, leading to a coma no doctor could explain.